I would like to welcome everybody to this evening's presentation. My name is Peggy Kell. I'm Voter Service Chair for the League of Women Voters of Oak Park and River Forest. We have representatives here from the Illinois State Board of Elections and the Office of the Cook County Clerk's Office to talk about voter integrity, the Illinois State Board of Elections, what it does, to further educate us on your voting information and where it goes, what it does, how it's being used. The process tonight will be Kyle Thomas, who is from the Illinois State Board of Elections. A representative will speak first, maybe 20, 25 minutes, talk about the history of the state board, who's on it, how you get on it, just some information to kind of give us a background on what it does, and then also talk about the two interstate checking systems that we are in. Also, then that will be followed by Tonya Rice, who will be talking from the Cook County Clerk's Office about the passage of the automatic voter registration bill this past August. How that is going to work in the future, because I don't think it is starting until January. Am I correct on that? July, okay, for next year. And also talking about voter registration and voting in general in Illinois. After that, we will have questions of the two presenters. Without further ado, we're going to start with Kyle Thomas from the Illinois State Board of Elections.
Again, good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank you for inviting me to come speak to you tonight. My name is Kyle Thomas, and I am the Director of Voting and Registration Systems at the Illinois State Board of Elections. My career with the board began over 16 years ago. The State Board of Elections was formed by Article 3, Section 5 of the Illinois Constitution, effective July 1st, 1971, to have general supervision over the administration of the registration and election laws throughout the state. The board is composed of 8 members, the members of which are appointed by the governor to serve staggered 4-year terms. The current membership is made up of our chairman, William J. Cadigan, our vice chairman, John R. Keith, and members Andrew K. Carruthers, Ian K. Linneberry, William M. McGuffage, Catherine S. O'Brien, Charles W. Schultz, and Cassandra B. Watson. The top elected constitutional officer makes the recommendation to the governor on behalf of their party when the governor is of the opposite party. So currently, the Attorney General makes the recommendations to the governor for the Democratic Party's selections. The members are then confirmed by the Senate before serving. The board maintains 2 offices, one in Chicago and one in Springfield, and I am based out of the Springfield location. Board staff are not permitted to participate in any political activities. This means, as an employee, I'm not allowed to donate to a political or candidate campaign, to sign a petition, to post a sign in my yard, or a bumper sticker on my car. And I am not allowed to attend any fundraising events. I am allowed to vote. In Illinois, elections are conducted by each of the local election authorities. This includes registering voters and maintaining voter rolls. There are 109 separate election jurisdictions consisting of 100 county clerks, 7 city boards of election commissioners, and 2 county board of election commissioners. The Help America Vote Act, or HAVA, of 2002, among other things, required states to develop and maintain a centralized voter registration database. In Illinois, our system is known as the Illinois Voter Registration System, or IVRS. Voter registration list maintenance is a requirement of the National Voter Registration Act, or NVRA, of 1993. Illinois statute requires a local database in connection with the centralized database. This is known as a bottom-up registration system. The majority of states in the country have what is known as a top-down system, where the information is directly entered from or by the registrars into the centralized database. Here in Illinois, each local election authority, similar like Cook County here, has their own database in their facility. The registrations are entered into that database, and then the information flows up to the statewide system. All decisions regarding list maintenance in Illinois are made by the local election jurisdictions. IVRS alerts the election authorities to many types of matches. And when more than one jurisdiction is involved with a match, both are given an opportunity to weigh in on the outcome of the potential match. The statewide system is a tool to alert the election jurisdictions to potential duplicate registrations, among other things. However, requires the elimination of duplicate names from the list. At the time of entry into the database, a voter registration through web services is checked against the statewide system looking for potential matches. If none are found at that time, the registration does enter into the database. Then, through batch processing, more intricate matching is done to alert the election jurisdictions of further potential matches based on such things as nicknames and soundexing. Excuse me. This information is alerted to the jurisdictions through what are known as buckets within the IVRS system. There are many buckets within the system for several different items. One of those other items would be the potentially deceased voters. On a monthly basis, we match our registration database against the file from the Illinois Department of Public Health to identify potentially deceased voters. Weekly, we check against the Department of Corrections for incarcerated voters, as individuals who are currently convicted and serving time in a penal institution are not allowed to vote under state statute. The system also provides the election jurisdictions the ability to check Social Security information, either real-time, upfront, or also through batch processing, as every registration that enters the system that has a last four of a Social Security number attached gets a check against the Social Security Administration. There's also a check for driver's license and ID information that happens on a weekly basis through a batch process that bounces the information with the Secretary of State's data, and then again provides the information to the election jurisdictions through one of the buckets in IVRS. We also have potential duplicate matches across state lines. There is the Interstate Cross-Check Program, and then more recently the Electronic Registration Information Center, or ERIC. Illinois joined the Interstate Cross-Check Program in December of 2010 at the request of election authorities in order to have another tool to assist with their required list maintenance. Kansas, as the parent state, runs a comparison of each of the 28 states' registration lists and provides each member their list of potential duplicate registrations based on matches of first name, last name, and date of birth. They also provide indications if there is a match on Social Security number, if the information is available. In Illinois, we break the file into individual lists for the 109 election jurisdictions and provide it to them through the statewide registration database, again another bucket. NVRA does require the jurisdictions perform a systematic purge of their registration list at least every 2 years. As with all list maintenance, the jurisdictions must follow the National Voter Registration Act, or NVRA. The cross-check list assists them to identify voters who may have moved out of state and allow them to start the verification process instead of waiting the full 2 years. Election authorities cannot cancel a registration through the IVRS system because of a match with the cross-check. They have only two options for those matches. That is to mark the record for investigation, showing that they are still looking into it, or reject the match because they do not believe that it is the same individual. The Electronic Registration Information Center, or ERIC, membership was a requirement outlined in Senate Bill 172, now 1A-45 of the Election Code. Legislation was required due to the cost of joining and the ongoing requirements for both the state and the locals to follow. Illinois signed the membership agreement in December of 2015, but due to the budget situation, we were unable to make our required dues payment and become a full member until July of 2016. ERIC requires each member to provide data from the Department of Motor Vehicles and the voter registration database. Illinois statute also requires other state agencies to make data available for comparison. Those agencies are the Department of Employment Security, Department of Public Health, Department of Healthcare and Family Services, and Department on Aging. This information in ERIC is more than just the voter registration data in order to build a record for an individual before matching is performed. They also use the information from these various agencies to help find more updated addresses for the voter. ERIC does have several goals beyond identifying potential duplicate registrations across state lines. ERIC requires the member once every 2 years to perform outreach to individuals identified as eligible but unregistered, to inform these individuals on how they may become registered. In 2016, the state of Illinois complied with this by putting a notification on the statewide constitutional notification that went out from the Secretary of State's office. In Illinois, the requirement by state statute for outreach to the eligible but unregistered is a state requirement. All other outreach to voters who are currently registered is a requirement of the local election jurisdictions. ERIC does require outreach to or action on those registrations identified as a cross-state mover. Most jurisdictions would send an R-26 confirmation notice if the individual is shown to be moved out of state. ERIC also requires outreach or action on those registrations identified as having a newer address on file with the DMV versus their voter registration. With the passage of Senate Bill 1933, the AVR bill, the election jurisdictions will be able to automatically update the voter registration address instead of just sending them a notice. This is perfectly within the requirements of the ERIC membership, and it will be a much more efficient process for our voters. All outreach for ERIC is required to be performed within 90 days of a member requesting their report for that particular item. ERIC identifies potential duplicate registrations both across state lines and within a member state. Much like the IVRS system currently performs potential duplicate registration identification, ERIC also looks for duplicates within a state. ERIC also provides us national change of address information. The State Board of Elections has provided election jurisdictions with information regarding the National Change of Address, or NCOA, data for several years. Prior to Senate Bill 172, the election authorities could update a voter registration to a National Change of Address address if the new address was still within the election jurisdiction. If the address was outside the jurisdiction, they could only send a confirmation notice. In Illinois, with the passage of Senate Bill 172, election jurisdictions now use the National Change of Address information to automatically update a voter's registration address to match the National Change of Address, even across jurisdiction lines. As far as I'm aware, Illinois is still the only state that has this allowance. Voters do have the ability to reject this update with either their previous election jurisdiction or the newer current jurisdiction. It's very much open to the voter to deny that automatic update and to have that rejected and to remain registered at the original address. ERIC will also provide members with access to the Social Security Administration's death list. To date, we've only accessed or utilized the National Change of Address information from ERIC. We're currently performing programming in order to take advantage of all of the lists that ERIC does offer. I was also asked to briefly speak about the Presidential Advisory Commission on Election Integrity. I was asked why they may be requesting the list. That I can't speak to. What I can speak to is that in July, the board received a request for voter data, but not only voter data, there was also a request for information that the board does not possess. The commission in the original request had indicated that the information gathered would be made public. Electronic registration data maintained by the board is not accessible to the public. Per statute, it's only available to registered political committees for bona fide political purposes and to governmental entities for governmental purposes. The board has indicated that a clear governmental purpose is necessary, as well as the required fee of $500 for a statewide file. In addition, the board has indicated to the commission that the Attorney General has concerns that they would not be able to keep the data confidential. Supporting documentation indicating such has been requested as well to indicate that they can keep it confidential. To date, no information has been released to the commission. The responses that the board provided to the commission can be found on our website at www.elections.il.gov. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to hear now from Tonya Rice from the Cook County Clerk's Office. Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you again for having us here tonight. It's a real honor for me to speak with the League of Women Voters who are continuing to lead the fight to expand voter participation across our country. Tonight, I'd first like to give you a brief overview of the clerk's office and some of the things that the clerk is responsible for. Cook County Clerk David Orr is the Chief Election Authority for Suburban Cook County. The City of Chicago has a separate Board of Elections. In addition to election administration, the clerk oversees real estate and tax services, vital records, and ethics filings. Suburban Cook County has over 1.5 million registered voters. There are 126 municipalities in Cook County and 600 other elected units of government. For the past several years, Cook County Clerk David Orr has really advocated for a voter registration renaissance and has really looked towards the potential of technology-driven systems to help ensure access to voting and limit opportunities for fraud. Illinois has made great strides towards voter registration modernization. The clerk's office has worked very closely with the State Board of Elections, and we greatly respect all the work that Kyle's done and the State Board in advancing ERIC and a lot of the voting systems that are in use today. However, I do want to clarify Clerk Orr's position with respect to cross-check. Clerk Orr believes that Illinois should stop participating in cross-check for several reasons. Our office has always been extremely cautious with respect to cross-check data. As Kyle mentioned, it's only used for investigations, and we do a lot of outreach to voters and other election authorities to confirm information. However, we remain concerned about other jurisdictions and other entities that may misuse this data. In addition, Clerk Orr has found that Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach has really lost credibility, and he's become extremely partisan, and it appears that some of this data may be misused for political purposes. Therefore, our office strongly believes that ERIC is the best mechanism moving forward for data sharing and data collection. So this evening, I'd like to focus on three major data and technology reforms that Clerk Orr has advocated. First, there's online voter registration, which is a secure and easy portal for online applications. There's election day registration, which is a great safety net for same-day registration and automatic updates. And then there's also automatic voter registration, which we were all very pleased was passed this past August with unanimous bipartisan support. So first, Clerk Orr advocated for online voter registration, which was passed into law in 2013. I provided here a snapshot of the state's portal, which outlines all of the requirements required to vote and walks voters through the process of submitting their information online. Online voter registration offers several benefits. It's very efficient. It's a great and easy way for election staff to interact with citizens. It saves tons of paper, lots of mailings and costs, so it's very cost efficient. It's also very convenient for voters. Voters can log on from their homes, from their smartphones, any time of day and register from any location. And it also helps with data accuracy. Since voters are entering their own information, it reduces the chances of data entry errors. In addition, online voter registration makes it very easy for the clerk's office to collect data and perform some metrics on how the system's performing. So you can see here in 2016, online voter registration steadily increased and really peaked right before the November election. On this slide, you can really see the growth of online voter registration since 2013. It was kind of steady earlier this year, but it's really picked up in August as campaigns are starting to get more people on board and registered. So the second data and technology initiative that Clerk Orr advocated for was election day registration, which was passed into law in 2014. This really encourages participation and reduces barriers to entry for voting. Again, it provides a safety net to correct registration errors and really streamlines electronic data processes. Election day registration was fully implemented for the first time in a presidential election this past November, and it was particularly popular with younger voters. So you can really see the growth here, particularly between the ages of 20 and 30. About 26% of our registered voters participated in election day registration. In addition, Election Day registration was very popular with women more so than men. About 53% of women participated in Election Day registration compared to 47% of men. And overall, in the total population of registered voters for Cook County, women do comprise more registered voters than men, and there's a fairly broad distribution of age ranges. So the most recent advancement, supported by the Clerk and a broad coalition of citizen action groups, including the League of Women Voters and Just Democracy, is automatic voter registration. This was signed into law on August 28th, and as I mentioned, it was passed with unanimous bipartisan support in both the House and the Senate. It makes the management of voter lists and eligible voters much easier for election officials, and it really simplifies the registration process for voters. Several organizations have conducted studies on automatic voter registration, and these studies have really underscored the need for AVR. The Brennan Center for Justice found that 1 in 4 eligible citizens is not registered to vote. 1 in 8 registrations in the U.S. is invalid or inaccurate. 1 in 9 Americans move every year. And a lot of voters incorrectly believe that their voter registration information will transfer with them when they move, when in reality, in most places, you have to re-register in order to vote. In addition, the Pew Charitable Trust conducted a study of Illinois last year, and they found that 700,000 people were registered at addresses where they no longer live. So automatic voter registration will help address all of these issues. This is a copy of the official synopsis of the automatic voter registration legislation. It's really fairly straightforward. Whenever an eligible voter goes into a government agency and wants to apply for or update or renew their driver's license or state ID, they'll be automatically registered, or their information will automatically be updated. And citizens who do not want to participate and be added onto the rolls have the option to opt out, and the law respects the privacy of those who choose not to participate in the system. So the law is really going to be rolled out in 2 phases based on the type of agency. Automatic voter registration through the Office of the Secretary of State should be implemented no later than July 1st of 2018. And the law defines designated automatic voter registration agencies, which should be implemented no later than July 1st, 2019. This includes the Department of Human Services, Employment Security, Financial and Professional Regulation, and Natural Resources. The law also defines a dual purpose application, which all of these agencies will accept, so it'll be a fairly seamless process. There are several benefits to automatic voter registration, similar to online voter registration and election day registration. It really improves government efficiencies and the accuracy of voter rolls. It will save a lot of money processing paper applications traditionally, although we will probably incur some costs with additional mailings, but resources can be diverted towards other activities. It reduces the need for greater instances of election day registration. This past November, our office found that 80% of people who registered on election day used a state ID that matched their address where they were registered to vote. So with automatic voter registration, this all would have happened seamlessly. Automatic voter registration will also improve the security of systems. The state board is working on a new portal and updated data transfer technology, so all of our systems will be more secure in the future. The county clerk will also send out written notices to individuals letting them know when information has been updated. Automatic voter registration should boost participation all around for all citizens, particularly those who have challenges going to the polls, like active duty military, senior citizens, and disabled voters. And it's truly a bipartisan legislation. It benefits Democrats, Republicans, Independents. There's no bias in this law. Illinois was the 10th state to pass automatic voter registration. Oregon was the first, and we've seen really good trends so far with the states that have implemented it. In Oregon, there were about 100,000 people who became active voters out of the 250,000 who were automatically registered. This is a map which kind of outlines where the legislation is passed and where it's pending. The Cook County Clerk is in the process of developing a new website, so you'll be able to go on and view this information in an interactive format, and we look forward to updating the website with new information as automatic voter registration is implemented. So again, thank you very much for having us here this evening. We really love automatic voter registration, and we look forward to implementing it in the future.
Thank you. So if you've made out a card with a question, Joan's going to walk around and she can pick it up for you, make it a little easier on you. If there's another question you want to write, or you think of one as another one is being answered, please feel free to write another question, and either you can just come up and put it right there, or Joan can come around and pick it up again. So actually, the first question I'd like to try is, I have a question about 17-year-olds, that they can register to vote. They can register as a 17-year-old to vote in the March primary, correct? If there's going to be 18 by the time the November election comes along. Can they also then, if they're a registered voter, even though they're only 17, can they also take training for deputy register training? That I would, because all you need to be a deputy register is a registered voter.
That's correct.
To register other voters. Do you think that we're going to be put out of a job? I just want, I wonder if it will drop off with people being able to, with more and more people being sort of caught, so to speak, at the DMV and other places that you've listed in the next couple of years.
We certainly anticipate a drop in deputy voter registrations, just as we've seen a decline in different types of registrations due to online voter registration. With automatic voter registration, it should be even more dramatic than that moving forward, but there will always be a need for additional people on the ground helping make sure that no one falls through the cracks.
One of your slides said that 1 in 4 U.S. citizens are eligible but not registered to vote. Do you know what percentage of people in Cook County are eligible but not registered?
I don't know that number offhand, but I'll certainly get back to you on that.
What are the duplications, Kyle, what are the duplication rates uncovered by the use of the cross-check system or the ERIC system?
Not sure exactly what.
When cross-check does, if I understand the question correctly, what's the percentage of finding that you have duplicate registered voters in Illinois and Missouri?
Okay.
Or do you even have those statistics? Do they accumulate those statistics for both of those systems?
I don't have. I've got a total potential duplicates identified by each system for 2017. The estimate for ERIC, it was an estimate, was 147,458 of the total 21 participating states and territories, Illinois being one of those. In 2017, the cross-check found a potential of 542,065 out of the 28 states that are participating. And I will say that the ERIC matching is a much more refined matching because it has a lot more information available. It takes information from not only the voter registration database, but also from the Secretary of State or the DMV database, builds a record for an individual, and then does matching. One of the main things we match on within the statewide database here in Illinois is driver's license. It's very important. But once you cross state lines, you cannot match on a driver's license because every state produces their own driver's license number. So you lose access to that matching key that you have when you're matching just within the state. ERIC does utilize information from the DMV to then build a record. For instance, it takes an individual that maybe their voter registration doesn't have a social security number, but their driver's license information would have that, and then they can build that to then to match across state lines.
Okay. Tonya, will automatic voter registration automatically register convicted felons who have served their time? if they apply for a license, I assume, or if they go through.
That's correct. So in Illinois, only incarcerated individuals who have been convicted of a crime are not eligible to vote. Anyone that's awaiting trial, and certainly like pretrial detainees, can receive a ballot. So there's no restriction on automatic voter registration for that population.
Okay. Because we are in two systems, if the suggestion or your comment was that the clerk's office, David Orr, does recommend that we be in one system and use the ERIC system because it seems to have more fail-safes and is less political. How do we go about, because they had to vote, because it was an expenditure, you had to vote to establish, to join the ERIC system, how would the board do that to step away from either ERIC or step away from cross-check? What would be the process if that would be something that the board would want to do?
Well, the board is aware of the concerns, and it was a board vote to join the system, and it would be a board vote to leave.
Okay.
They would take all information into consideration. As mentioned, it was a request of the election jurisdictions to join, and they would definitely take into consideration the election jurisdiction's position on remaining in, and then be a vote of the 8-member board.
Okay, so the board would take the initiative on that. Many boards are encouraged to do things because citizens call them and say, hey, get the heck out of that, or putting pressure on them. How, if a citizen feels that cross-check is not doing what it should, and only the board can extricate us from that, how do they contact board members or a director to make their feelings known?
Probably the best thing to do is to send an email through our website.
I have to tell you, I did a hard time finding out the individual website, the individual emails of the commissioners. They're listed, but they didn't have any other information. Now, granted, myself and websites don't always get along on finding data, but I could not find that. Is that pretty easy to find of what their email addresses are?
I'm not sure if the contact information for each board member is on there. You would want to just send an email to the webmaster, and then they could forward the information on.
Okay, do you know of a reason why are all appointed boards that, I don't want to use the charge word of inaccessible, but most boards, local boards, you can contact them directly somehow. Is that that's just the way the State Board of Elections has always done it?
I do not know.
Okay, but if we contact the webmaster and send them a note or send them an email, that would get to the board members?
Yes.
Okay. Since the clerk's office has, David Orr has said that he does think that cross-check should be, we should extricate ourselves from that. Do you know of any data misuse by other jurisdictions with cross-check?
I'm not aware of any particular misuses. There have been a few lawsuits that have been instituted where some organizations have alleged that voters were improperly canceled and there have been illegal purges. But as I mentioned, Cook County, and as Kyle described, all counties in Illinois are really instructed to investigate all of these records before acting on them.
Okay. There is comment that pretrial detainees in Cook County Jail completed ballots in the last election, but that the ballots couldn't be mailed due to lack of stamps in the jail. Do you know, has the clerk heard anything about this, and if in fact they have, how they could prevent that in the future?
It's my understanding that the ballots are picked up and not mailed from the jail, so I'm not aware of
like
any
on one day or something, or
that's
okay.
correct. Yeah.
So they're told when they're supposed to be picked up. Then you think?
That's my understanding. I'm not involved intimately in that process, but
I could answer that.
okay.
Michelle Bicani Wiley is supposedly, she informed everyone that she had arranged for voting machines to be brought into the jail. for the next election, so people could vote right in the jail?
It's been our policy to deliver mail ballots, the paper ballots to the jail and not bring in the touch screens and actually tabulate the votes within the jail. But that's certainly something that I can research and find out more information on.
Okay, let's see, does a voter have to request voter registration at the DMV when this goes through, or will they be approached? So if they go to change their license, will someone have to say, yes, I'd like to register here, or will the initiative come from the staff at the DMV of asking whether they want to be automatically change their registration if they're getting a new license?
It will come from the Secretary of State staff. Those individuals that are applying for Real ID, even if the staff forgets to mention it, the standard is they will be registered. And those, if the staff forgets to mention it, but then it would, it's the same process as an opt-in. Those that are Real ID are opt-out, and those that are not applying for the Real ID would be an opt-in, similar to the way it is now, but it would all be electronic transmission, and there would be a single form that's a dual application to be utilized for registration and your DMV process.
Okay, and so if they were automatically registered, even if someone forgets to mention it, will they then get a notice that they are registered?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the local election authority, for everybody that they register, they send a registration card to.
Got it. Let's see, to the board evaluating the cross-check and ERIC systems to determine their usefulness, is the board evaluating the cross-check and ERIC systems to determine their usefulness and accuracy? Does the board see both systems as necessary to maintain the integrity of voter rolls?
As I mentioned, we joined because of a request from the election jurisdictions. At this time, the biggest difference, the biggest benefit for the cross-check is the fact that we have the surrounding states around Illinois are in cross-check. The only surrounding state, which is Wisconsin, that's in ERIC and not in cross-check. So that's why our border counties still see value in the data matching, because they border Iowa and Missouri and Kentucky and Indiana, the bordering states that are participants in cross-check but not participants in ERIC.
Got it. Okay. So having two systems with the states surrounding us makes it easier to interface with them on voter rolls.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually more difficult for the state because it's actually two
Two
processes.
different, right.
I mean, I would love for all states to join ERIC, but I have no control over that.
Okay. Certainly with all the publicity that has come out in this last year, the possibility of Russian interference in the election, what has the board talked about it? Has David Orr's office talked about how, because if I'm not mistaken, there had been some comments that Illinois was affected, that there were certain areas of Illinois that voters that were maybe affected by this. What are your two agencies doing to either combat that or to look into it?
Well, there was a breach in the summer of 16 of the statewide database, and we realized the breach. As soon as we realized it was happening, we closed the hole. We found the hole, closed the hole immediately, and then identified roughly 70,000 individuals whose records may have been viewed. I say may because of the way that the queries that were sent into the database, the way that they were constructed, it wasn't giving me all of Kyle Thomas's information. It was queries based on a voter ID number, and what was pulled back may have been complete gibberish for one of them, or it may have been an individual's information. But we identified the 70,000 people that were potentially affected, and they were all sent notifications of that. But like I said, as soon as the hole was found, it was patched, it was closed, and several security changes have been put in place since then.
How do you find a hole? I mean, does someone come? How does that come up?
There are software programs that scan websites looking for holes. Ever since last fall, we have partnered with the Department of Homeland Security, and they provide weekly scans. They scan our systems weekly and provide us a report. Since then, they have not discovered any other potential holes.
And the holes, meaning that the data that has been breached is Social Security numbers, or, I mean, because they can't look at they can look to see that you voted. They can't look to see that I voted for this person in this race and this person in that race.
Correct.
Correct? They're just looking to see that, yes, you did go to the polls, this is your voting, that you're a pretty consistent voter, you're not a consistent voter. Is that the only information they get, or do they get your Social Security number, which we all know can be scary if someone gets your Social Security and your address, and your birth date, and your name? Because those are the three things that they could mine for fraud. So is that the information that they'd get with a hole in the data system?
Well, again, the hole is just the possibility, because of having a hole, the possibility exists that they could try and get in. With ours, like I said, I can't speak to the exact amounts of information that was gathered for an individual. We did, with an outreach that we provided to the individuals that were affected, we provided a tool on our public website where they could go and look and see what information exists on their voter record. Not every voter record has a date of birth. Not every voter record has last four of SSN. Not every voter record has driver's license information on it. So we did provide a tool where the individuals can go and look it up and find out what information does exist on their voter record.
But that's incumbent on the voter to check out to see what's out there.
If you were notified, yes.
Okay. Anything from the Cook County Clerk's office?
Yes, we're also cooperating and participating with the Department of Homeland Security on scans. Kyle and I have been involved in meetings with the Illinois State Police and DHS and the FBI. We take cybersecurity extremely serious during these times. Our Director of Elections, Noah Prates, is also very involved with cybersecurity measures on the national level. And so this is something that our office is very engaged in, and we continue to research and find out new protocols and hopefully strengthen our systems, for elections to come.
What is the percentage of actual voters, of actual voter fraud compared to the number of actual votes cast in Illinois?
I don't have a percentage. I will say that the clerk's office has never taken the position that voter fraud doesn't happen. It does occur in extremely rare instances, and we take it very seriously, and we seek to prosecute those instances where it does happen. But as I mentioned before, Clerk Orr does not believe that it's on the widespread scale that's been alleged by the Presidential Commission. I think I distributed some information on Clerk Orr's position on voter fraud as well.
Actually, just a kind of straightforward question. How can we be sure or check that you're still registered to vote, that you haven't been kicked out by either one of the systems? Now, I thought I heard you say that you were never just kicked out by either Eric or Crosscheck, that you are flagged to that the possibility you have to check, but that those two systems cannot just invalidate your voter registration. Is that correct? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, those systems do not just invalidate. However, if anybody wants to check their voter registration, on our public website we have a tool called the Am I Registered, where any individual can put in their name, put in their address, and find out the status of their registration, also find out the voting districts that they are registered in, and the location of their polling place.
And you can do the same on Cook County Clerk David Orr's site if you're a suburban Cook County voter.
If you're concerned that the voting record will be shared with can a voting record be shared with the Federal Commission on Voter Integrity? Is that what they were asking for?
I don't know. I mean, like I said, there's been a request of our board The board has responded. We haven't.
For data. They
Yes.
requested for voter data.
Yes. But I can't answer that, whether they qualify. And that's part of the question that had been sent back from the board.
And the board is saying that one of the reasons that they're saying no right now is because they don't know exactly what they're going to use the information for.
One of the reasons is our statute restricts the release of electronic registration information to political committees and governmental entities. And so there's concern on whether or not they are qualified as a governmental entity, and then there's concerns on whether or not they can keep the information confidential or they would have to release it.
Why do you think in the last it seems like we've been in crosscheck now for 10 years, and we've been in ERIC for, I wrote that down somewhere, 4 years?
1 year.
Well,
1 year.
1 year, that's right, because we didn't pay our bill that first year. Why do you think so much has been brought up about that? I mean, if we've been in for 7 years, what's been the last 6 years that we haven't heard a lot of controversy about it?
Because the Kansas Secretary of State, it's leading crosscheck, and is also very involved in the Presidential Commission. I think more people are giving greater scrutiny to the way this data is used and what the purpose and motivations are behind different requests.
More politicized now than possibly people were looking at it before as being politicized?
That's correct.
And also with the, I think, with the scare of the Russian, whether there was involvement or anything in the last election, that compounds, whether it's as secure as ERIC or one's better than the other. Okay. The ACLU's Let People Vote campaign has identified as a priority advocating for statewide legislation that requires jail or prison officials to provide individuals with voter registration form and information upon their release. Can you comment from the perspective of the board or the clerk's office on challenges to achieve this objective?
It certainly sounds like a worthwhile effort. In my opinion, and I know the clerk is very interested in doing as much voter outreach as possible. We do have limited staff, so that is one resource limitation that we have, but in general, this is an excellent policy, and I would wholeheartedly support it.
And I know the clerk's office has always been very helpful to the league and a lot of our activities. Would they think of partnering with organizations like our own, which are nonpartisan, to maybe take the partnership with the clerk's office to do that as maybe not as a project, but as something to alleviate the staff's time?
Certainly, any nonpartisan activity our office is interested in partnering with.
So what are you going to do when David leaves?
That question I can't answer right now.
It's been a long run and a very good run, but it's going to be an interesting future, I think, for the clerk's office. I certainly do appreciate you guys coming out. I appreciate all of your questions, and I think there's been some really good ones here, and I certainly have learned a lot. Again, having this posted on our website so that you can certainly take in their presentations at a little bit more leisurely rate, and we're going to try and get the PowerPoint on, because I think there's a lot of good information, Tonya, from the clerk's office, especially looking at the age, for online voter registration, and those are interesting statistics too, I think, for people to know. Does Cook County, compared to the other counties, have a higher rate of voters, registered voters, and then also people coming out to the polls? Do you guys have that kind of statistics?
I don't have that statistic offhand, but I'll definitely get it online for you.
Okay, because I know if you go, you can check to see. Oak Park had, in the big elections, in the presidential election, Oak Park and River Forest have very high voter turnout. And not all communities have that, but I just wondered if they compared the county itself as voter turnout to other counties.
Sure.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate you all coming out on a stormy night and a cold night here. And once again, I'd like to thank Kyle and Tonya for coming out and joining us.